Good evening to all our friends out there. Good evening to everyone. Welcome to AfReach. This is your friend and brother, Reverend Dr. Aquilus Ricks, coming to you live on our AfReach feed. We want to say a great, happy, today is Thursday to you. Wherever you are, we want to say happy Thursday. We are excited, that we can come again. Last week we had a little bit of glitch, some situations, but that we had to cancel our telecast. But today we hoping that we'll go through as smooth as possible. But we are excited again for this opportunity that we can come together, that we can have a guest to dialogue with us in an era of significance, an era of importance that is dear, I believe, to all of our hearts. It's amazing when you think about the world we are living in and what is going on in our world and the different stories we are hearing. For those of you who do not understand my passion for what we do here, I'm from Africa, as you can tell my voice, specifically from Liberia. But there is something about the continent of Africa that really breaks my heart. I generally follow the news, at least when I have time to do that. But the news about Africans crossing from North Africa into Europe is something that really struck my heart. Oftentimes they get to Europe, they get to North Africa, they get on these ferries or these boats to cross over, and unfortunately we hear news that the boats capsized, and thousands, hundreds of Africans they are perishing in the waters of the Mediterranean Sea.
Yeah.
And it is out of that hunger, to see Africa do right, to see Africa take care of its citizens, that moved me to start this organization called AfReach. We are Africans for the restoration of ethics in government, and it's something that drives me to call attention to leadership in Africa. What are we doing? To spare the lives of our people who are perishing, trying to find a better life outside of our countries, the countries in Africa. Now, nothing wrong with people having an opportunity to study abroad and travel abroad. But if you see Africans perishing in the waters just to cross over into Europe for a better life, if you see these things happening frequently, it's alarming, and it's something to call our attention to. And it is out of that, that news, or that heartbroken situation that AfReach was born,
Mm.
to help African governments, to come alongside African governments to do the right thing. So yeah, we look at different sector of society, and we bring guests on that would deal with issues that impacting Africa, and how these experts can share their opinions and their thoughts, how we can improve these different sectors. And tonight with us, we are pleased to have Miss Gabrielle Saygbe. She is a special education teacher and also a case manager in the area of alternative schools. And she's going to be dialoguing with me concerning this era of alternative schools, and how that sector can be developed or improved on the continent of Africa. We want to help Africa do the right thing in many different areas, in many different arenas. And today we're going to be looking at alternative schools. So, Miss Gabriel, welcome to AfReach podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Reverend Dr. Riggs. I am so humbled to dialogue, to be a part of this conversation. When I got the invitation, I'm just like, sure, yes. I'm just so very humble. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a joy to have you here with us. So, can we just dive right into our conversation?
Yes, we can.
So the term alternative school may be kind of foreign to a lot of people. All right. Some of us understand what it means, but just for the sake of foundation, can you explain to us what is an alternative school? And its importance in the area of education.
Well, education as a whole, we know that education is our, you know, equal playing field. It's the equilibrium. It's the balance to get further in life. And so, how you're educated, whether formally or informally, matters. And when it comes to alternative schools can be seen or defined as a school that is a school nonetheless. It still adheres to state standards. Students still receive a high school diploma. They follow the curriculum of, the state or what have you. They're integrated in districts. The only thing that makes them different is time, setting, and population. And so time, where you would see a regular high school, this is alternative schools are primarily for high schools. So where you would see a regular high school that would start from about, 8:30 and end at 3:30. An alternative school time might be different. You might see it as night classes where, they come at 5 and they leave by 7, or just that alternative time in which they are learning. And then setting, there is a misconception that alternative schools are only in urban areas or in the ghettos or in the hoods. But we are seeing alternative schools in the suburbs, in the West Metros. And so the setting of it is not at a regular high school. It is at its own space, having its own time. And then the structure of it, the curriculum is the same. Teachers have to follow, state standards, but the structure of the day is a bit different, whereby a regular high school will have those 6 or 7, 8 classes. An alternative school will have those 6 or 7, 8 classes. You'll get your core content classes, the English, the mathematics, the science, those things of that nature. But you also might have, an hour of work study where you are getting credit and you are getting graded on the work that you do outside of school. Maybe you have a job at, the local Walmart or the local McDonald's, and because you are able to work and have those soft skills, we now take that and we implement it into the curriculum so that you can get learning that way as well.
Wow, wow. Now, is there a misconception concerning alternative schools that's out there? Because for me, again, I don't know a lot about this, but does it also include school for disabled people or people that impaired? Is that, does that fit in the context of alternative schools?
So alternative schools definitely have a misconception. So the misconception or the stereotypes that alternative schools seem to have is that these are students that have been, displaced, or students who have been, you know, into criminal trouble or criminal activity, students who are teen moms, students who are, whatever did not work out for them in regular school, be it that they're a bad child, they now have to go to the alternative school. But as we all know, learning is changing. And so it is not a school for the impaired. Because when we talk about being impaired, whether that's, not having mobility, not being able to see, not being able to hear, maybe you're wheelchair bound, we're talking a bit about being handicapped. So that's a bit different, right? So it's not for the handicap, but it is for students who, whether it is a life circumstance or whether it is their learning disability. Not all alternative schools have, special services for those with learning disabilities. But when students are coming to an alternative school, it is because something at, their typical high school was not working for them. Maybe, they face life issues and they weren't able to obtain credit, and now they're credit deficient. So now they will come to an alternative school to gain credits to graduate, to get on track to graduate. Maybe they haven't been in school for years. Maybe they dropped out of school because of what have you, and now they're looking to come back into school. So now you go to an alternative school to be reintegrated into the school system. So there's so many different reasons that people, students go to alternative schools. They tend to service students who are between the ages of 15 and 21. So there's some leeway there for you to still get your learning, but it is not a school for those that are impaired. Students don't necessarily have learning disabilities. Sometimes it's just life that has happened that is causing them to go to this school. I'm getting some feedback.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit
Yeah,
feedback too. But
the comments
I'm curious. I'm curious because
saying it's about attention.
you
Yeah.
know, let's talk a bit concerning the kind of people who teach in alternative schools. Let's talk about the educators. What
Yeah.
kind of profile? What kind of profile you look for, or what kind of profile of an individual that will fit in alternative school?
I say this humbly. Some people say that the teachers that teach at an alternative schools, they're suckers. They are suckers for love because these are people who love education. These are, and I say that respectfully, these are people who have immense flexibility, teachers who have, you know how, not just with instruction. So these are licensed educators who have gone to get, their credential, their license, their masters, their undergraduate degrees in education and in that specific field of content. But because you are working with a diverse population, your students might be, even at a regular high school, at a traditional high school, your student might be homeless. Your student might be a teen mom. These are students where you now have to be extremely patient. These are students who are, living by themselves, working by themselves. So I would say the type of educators that are at alternative schools, I would hope, are educators that truly feel led to call, led to are called to educate. They truly feel like this is my passion. I'm not doing this for the money. I'm not doing this just to get teacher of the year. I'm not doing this to build my, professional portfolio, but I'm doing this because somewhere in this population, these are students that have been written off. And so I now believe that I can step in to support them to go on to the next chapter. Our students are experiencing graduation tomorrow. We have students who are going off to 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges. We have students that are going off to the trades. And so it is just that in their 4 years of high school, something happened. Whether, someone said in the comments they needed extra attention, or, maybe the class sizes were so big that they have social anxiety. Now they need a smaller setting. And so now they're at a alternative school. But teachers who teach at alternative schools, they are, well credentialed teachers who have, experience in most of the time many different content areas, but they just are, I'm speaking from a personal, experience of, we feel called to do this work.
It's interesting, and as you were elaborating, I couldn't help but think one word that kept coming to my mind as you were speaking was the word trauma. I mean, am I right? Is that a safe word to say? When you think about alternative school, you think about students that have gone through. Again, it doesn't have to be just trauma, but is trauma part of the issues that you find students dealing with? In fact, by the way, tell us what a typical day is like for you. You know what I mean? As you interact, because I see you are also a case manager. So what are some of the issues that come across your desk that you deal with on a daily basis in this environment?
Yeah, so I will say this, Reverend Ricks, I will say this. An educator, be it at any school. I am young, but by the grace of God, I've been able to be in education for over 8 years. And I have worked with adult learners. I have worked with early childhood. I've worked with elementary students. I have taught middle school, high school. I've taught alternative. I've been able to be exposed to the sector of education. And what I will say is that trauma informed care is something that we are well versed in. Understanding that each and every young person and adult, your colleagues that are coming into the building, they have, some type of experience with trauma. That's number one. And so I don't want to label that word with alternative schools, but it is something that I do keep in mind every day that I do the work when I do the work that I do. And I would say a regular day, a regular school day for us, we are there at 8:30. School starts at 8:30 and we end at 3:20. So they have a full day. But in the day, for me, I support and I co-teach English and math. So students specifically who have special services, these are students who have learning disabilities. These are disabilities that are invisible. Maybe they do not read at their grade level. Maybe they cannot do mathematics or arithmetic at their grade level. Maybe they have been diagnosed with, ADHD or a behavior disorder. They have some diagnosis, saying that, because of their disability, it impedes the way that they learn. Maybe they might need to move around a little bit. Maybe they may need, low lights. Maybe they're sensitive to certain things. So that is the direct population that I support and that I work with. Now, what that looks like is when they go to their math class, this is a high school algebra class. In that algebra class, they have two teachers. I work with a co-teacher. Sometimes my co-teacher teaches a lesson, I teach a lesson. But now, after we have given instruction, what that looks like is I now will help you with what we learned. So after we've, gotten whatever the content is, whatever we're learning about, now you and I will work on that one-on-one. Either we'll go away from the learning space, or maybe we'll, I'll let you do it on your own and then we'll do it together. So I do co-teaching with English and in math. In Africa, primarily Liberia, and here in the Americas, we can't read. And I say that as a generalized statement. The numbers show that literacy is at an all-time low. People are not able to read and write with comprehension. And even here in America, our students are not excelling and performing the way that they should when it comes to reading. And so reading is something that I personally love. It's something that I personally do. It's something that I'm growing in, because as a student, I struggled a lot with reading. I struggled a lot with reading. And so that is something that I pushed myself to get better at. But nonetheless, a regular school day looks like me supporting young people with their needs. And then that case management part is saying, okay, you have a reading goal. You have a goal about your behavior. You have a goal about your organization. Have we been meeting that goal? Where are we? Are we making progress? Are we making insufficient progress? Have you been attending school? Why haven't you been attending school? Looking at the barriers to, the barriers that are in front of your learning, and then having those conversations with the family, with the teachers, with the staff, having that conversation as a team to ensure that this student gets what they need. On a regular day, our students, and I'm sorry, I know I'm going on a tangent. On a regular day, our students, they're getting their regular classes, but then they're also, engaged in things like agriculture. We're doing hydroponics. They're growing plants and produce inside. They're going to glass blowing, where they're learning how to make, objects or cups or mugs out of glass. So they're doing different things that are their state content, requirements to get that, Minnesota State standard diploma. But then we also expose them to different things as well, such as the trades and vocational skills, which I would argue we see a lot in Africa. We see the vocational school. And so alternative schools brings vocation into the learning at a younger age. And so, yeah, that's what I would say regarding that.
Excellent. Excellent. You know, we have some comments coming in here, and I want to thank all of those that are just commenting. Really appreciate all your comments. There are some that says, you know, maybe they need extra attention.
Yeah.
Monique Tay gave a heart. She kind of loved what's going on. Uh, Great conversation. VVM Alba says, yes, services are so important. Lucretia Davis says, this is a great learning forum that I hope many patients could participate in. Eva says, there are special students that need special attention. I think teachers are just so
Yes.
awesome, excellent. But we have a question here from Visha Rick. She says, how can we mitigate the barriers for those youth who are not in school in Africa? So we want to bring it down to Africa because
Mm.
AfriH, the vision of AfriH is, you know, what we do here, our expertise, how it can help Africa improve. So when you think in the context of Africa, you know, how can we mitigate these barriers, you know, to the youth, you know, who are not in school in Africa? I mean, how can this expertise translate into a third world country like you know continent of Africa where you see the youth struggle, whether it's from civil war, whether
Yeah.
it's you know no jobs for the parents and the children have to work at a young age, you know, I mean, how can we mitigate this situation for them?
This first and foremost, Mrs. Ricks, thank you so much for that comment or that question. You know, this is something that cannot be answered in 30 minutes, right? But it is something that impacts us all deeply. You know, we go back home, we travel home, and we see, you know, children selling market on the side of the road. We see, if you are not able to pay your school fees, if you do not have important, um, you know, if you don't have finances, you cannot come to school. And so I think when I look at what system we have here, and thinking of how that can translate to Africa as a whole, America, and I say this as, you know, best as I can, America says that we value education. And I'm sure Africa values education. We know that when you educate the child, you educate the community, you educate the nation. But we say that in a way here in the West that by law, if you are not in school, if your child at any age does not attend school for a certain amount of days, we hold the parent or the guardian, the caretaker, we hold them responsible. They can face jail time, they can face court fees. Coupled with that, we have free education. Coupled with that, we have the infrastructure where children can get, you know, the breakfast and lunch and a snack. We have the infrastructure where our tax dollars pays for you to get the basic level of education, right? If you want to go on to post-secondary, that is up to you and your family. And so I think the nations of Africa as a whole, we have to now look at our future. Where do we want to go, right? Africa in itself, the continent is brilliant, right? We have fed the world, we have poured out to the world. When we say, like, how does that translate, we have to now pour into our children. What are we doing in governments to say we will have free education? Now, I can only speak a little bit towards Liberia because when I look to Liberia, there are so many international schools. There are government schools, there are private schools, you know, you have, you know, there are different schools, but across the board, you are paying tuition. You are paying for tuition, you are paying for uniforms, you are paying for certain things. And so when we talk about, you know, eliminating barriers, we have to create public education. We have to say our children deserve to learn. Our children need to learn. Our children need to be literate. We have to get to a place where we make things free. I think eliminating barriers is getting to a place where we put it in law. You know, any society, people typically obey the law. If it is law, they obey the law. I think in Liberia as well, there was a law that came to pass that, you know, children cannot be caught selling, you know, market at a certain time. Great, that's in law now. If I'm not helping to bring money to my, you know, my family, how are you all helping me to get into schools? And so I think number one, starting with public education. Um, I think that would be the biggest, you know, elimination of moving a barrier. Yeah.
You know, the involvement of government in social change is so strategic to what we do here and what we our platform here. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because oftentimes appropriations, when it comes to the GDP of the nation, the appropriation of finances or monies, it goes into other sectors that, and again, we're not going to say one sector is important, more important than others. But we see education is in my estimation, again, Africa is a big continent. Every country is different, but
Yeah.
on a general sphere of things, it seems as if education is on the short end of the spectrum in most
Yeah.
African countries, not in
And in
all.
America, and in America, but
Yeah,
yes, yes,
the
yes.
funding of education, and so if the traditional schools being funded is a struggle, how much more you talking about alternative? You see what I'm saying? It's like, you know, um, the traditional learning environment is underfunded. Then if you take that and you go one step below, that's what they do. The alternative is lower than traditional learning. You know, I mean, how much money would even trigger there? You know what I mean? So so
I'm
so so
Let me come in really quick, Pastor Riggs.
yes.
Alternative schools is still in the funding for
Okay.
traditional schools. A lot of alternative schools are already in the district budget because they're connected to a district. They're not independent schools. They're not chartered schools. They're not private schools. And so I will, make that correction that it is um, funded the same way. But again, most of when we talk about our GDP, most of us work and we pay tax, and that tax is, broken up to various sectors. And so when we talk about nations in Africa that have low unemployment rate, or you have to wait until the end of the month to get a salary, um, I think too, that deeply impacts how education is funded. But if we said, if we all like dreamed big and said we would put X amount, primarily in Africa, if we said we would put X amount of money towards ensuring that students have books, that students are learning in buildings that have a roof that doesn't leak, that the tree won't just be the school won't just be under the tree, it'll be in an environment where you can be safe, where you're warm, where you're indoors, where you have an appropriate desk to learn, where you pay your teachers, where students don't have to bribe for grades. I think these are certain things that will eliminate barriers. When you take care of one, and you take care of one person, you settle one person, that person can settle the others, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I see a comment here, just to kind of support what you were just saying. Let me just read that. It's from Tia Mane. Liberia government is to be blamed for the poor education system we have in Liberia. We have so many brilliant minds in Liberia, but yet there is no proper education system to nurture those minds. And you can see this for Africa as a whole. And that's one of the things that we keep noticing. Yes, we have educated Africans. I mean, very educated Africans. But the scholastic
Undoubtedly.
system, yeah, the scholastic system to allow them to nurture and develop the minds of the next generation. That system, like what you mentioned, it could be on the books, what I
Mhm.
mean, but the implementation of that system is just the system is corroded. It's corroded. So we have all these educated Africans, but a system that is so broken that it just, you mentioned paying the teachers. What I mean? You mentioned having the infrastructure, that we allow students to come, in a nice environment to learn. And I like even the concept that you mentioned here about having a little breakfast of food for them, because in many parts of Africa there's just there's a need for food. I mean,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so the kids come to school on empty belly. How can they learn?
yeah.
You know what I mean? And so integrating some of these things, is very essential to the future of the next generation when it comes to Africa. And pretty much, that kind of just brought segment into We have a comment here from Melvina. She said the government need to pay the teachers. If teachers are not being paid, they will not show up to work. There are free schools in Liberia, not built by the government, but for the public.
Yeah.
However, government refused to pay. So you see this recurring thing. And we can only hope and pray that at some point, it would get to the minds of those elected officials, whether it's senators, representatives, government leaders, that they would pay attention to it. But
Yeah.
it seems as it's a recurring thing that being said over and over with no action. With no action. Your comment on that?
I think action starts with the people, you know, whether you be way at the top or at the very bottom. But if I don't feel empowered to take action, then I will say it's just a revolving door. This is just how it is. The government's corrupt. The government is greedy. They don't pay. Like, we'll just continue saying that narrative. I definitely, I believe there are parents who want the best for their children. There are parents that want to be able to not just afford the school fee and the uniform, but the bread, the butter, whatever, for them to eat as well, for them to have the holistic need. But I do think those who have the power, they have to look at what they're doing and its outcomes. And I could be saying this wrong. I believe it's the Y class. There's a Western African standardized test that is taken for high school students, right? So for me, I think one of the things that the Liberian government should be looking at is where are our students, scoring on those tests with their other West African counterparts? Where are we when we look at ourselves globally? Because if our students are not able to compete intellectually, on those, Westernized, that I think it's Y class. Is Am I saying that right? Anyone?
Yeah, I
Those
think it's
tests
called
that they
WIAC.
have
Yeah,
to
the West African
Y.
Examination Council, WIAC.
Yes. So if your students are coming in year after year at the bottom of the total pool, then we now have to step back. Let us look at curriculum. Number one, I would say this. Let me step back. School psychologists, research shows that if a student has clean clothes, if a student has a place to lay their head, if they have food to eat, and they are learning in a clean, and if they're in a clean environment to learn, they will learn. They will perform well and better. So number one, we have to meet the basic needs. Number one, there are basic needs, whether that's their intellectual, disabilities, whether that's their financial restraints. We have to meet the basic needs of the people. And our government has the capacity to do so, right? The governments of Africa, I believe, have the capacity to do so. We are building infrastructure, we're building roads, we're building, buildings and skyscrapers and trains and all these things. But if we take that time to meet the basic needs of the people, and then say, hey, we have to prepare the younger generation for their global counterparts to compete with the kids in India, to compete with the kids in Asia, to compete with, you know, the best of the best, which I would argue Africa has the best of the best thinkers, innovators, and learners, then we have to start meeting the basic need. And aside from that, we have to start preparing them for the world at large. And so if students are not performing well on that standardized test, how do we now, come back and look at who are our experts in the nation? I am not an expert, right? I'm an educator. I have know-how, but I'm not an expert at it all, right? So when we look at Africa and how we can like eliminate some of these barriers, who are our experts? We have the PTO, we have parent teacher meetings here. If we get our families together with government officials, with educators, if we come together and kind of cross mingle and discuss these issues, a lot of our problems will be solved because families know what they need. Government has the infrastructure to meet that need. So binding that together, I think can eliminate that. I hope I wasn't all over the place with that
It's okay.
response.
Yeah. We had a bit of feedback, but yes, I think we got the gist of what you're saying because it's about preparing them to compete. not just locally, but you're absolutely right to compete internationally, to compete globally, because kids their age in the West, and you mentioned India and other places, China. I mean, they're far advanced because there is no, the education system have been so taken care of. You know what I mean, that they just they are thrust to go forward,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the system have been taken care of, and I think for us as a continent we are lagging, because you're absolutely right. If the next generation is not being prepared academically, how can they compete against Americans, Europeans, Chinese, and Indians? They just cannot. So they will by default be on the low end of the spectrum. On the low end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
It's interesting because sometimes when we're having this conversation, it gets so rich that it hard to end. But nonetheless, we do this again. Not necessarily just having a long, a time to be together, but a meaningful, impactful time. I want you now to kind of segment a little bit, because our vision for AfriAge is helping Africa do better by doing right. Do better by doing right, and you kind of brought the gist of the whole thing of alternative education out there. That's just plain and clear. Do you see hope for Africa?
Most certainly. Most certainly. Without a doubt, without a shadow of a doubt. Um, we see so many African scholars, young African scholars, gaining opportunities through scholarships to study abroad, to go, across the globe and get exposure and get that learning. And oftentimes, when you look at what they're studying, whether it be social justice, whether it be something in public health, they are studying something specific to go back to, their country and build and do. And so I definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, see hope for Africa. I don't think that is a debate. I think what that looks like is us in the diaspora not sitting in this place of haughtiness, not sitting in the place of we know what the solutions are, because we are not on ground, we are not there. We know what we've experienced, we know the narration of the people that we're in proximity to, our loved ones and family members. But if we can take that which we know and combine it with the experts who are on ground, those that are living the everyday life, those that see the gaps, those that have a hand in power or are in leadership, if we're able to bridge that gap and connect, we can do mighty things. We really can.
Oh, wow, wow, wow. We can go on and on and on and on and on. Friends, you've heard our own sister just pour out her heart concerning this area of educating, alternative education. A group of people, young people that society says, they got to be left behind. But there are people like her who care about them and who care about the future, and who believe that there is something good in them that can be harnessed, and they come alongside these people, these young people, with all the different impairment, with all the different limitations they have. They come alongside them with love, with compassion, and with a hope that their future, they can live a future, a productive future. We just want to say this also to African leaders, African government. These are your citizens.
Yeah.
These are your citizens. With AfriAge, again, we want to help. We want to restore the whole idea of ethics in government. And one of the way you do the right thing is to just care for the people that's entrusted to you, the people that's on it, that
Yeah.
within these nations that you are leading. Yes, there's a temptation to just look inward, me, myself, and my family or my friends. But there's a whole generation, there's a whole nation that depends on you as a leader, to think about the next decade. What would the nation look like when you are gone? What will your legacy be like? What impact did you make? What contribution did you make towards a better nation, a better continent, or a better world? And all these things start with, is about legislations. We know that, but it's also made about making appropriations. Put money where it's needed. And as she said, you educate the child, you educate the nation. You educate the child, you educate the world. And so we want to just challenge you as a leader in Africa. Please don't forget, education, especially alternative. Students that are struggling to learn because they have some learning, issues. Create these institutions that will cater to their needs, that will cater to the development of their mind. It's needed. It's needed. Says Gabriel, any concluding thoughts this evening for our audience, or maybe government officials that may be watching this? Any concluding thoughts before we sign up tonight?
Wow. I say this. I say to everyone that is in the comments, one, thank you for engaging in the conversation and let us continue to have the conversation. We all are in proximity to somebody. We all know somebody who has influence, who has power, who is in a position to lead. And so let us not stop the conversation. We have to make noise about the needs of, you know, the needs of our people. And so those that might be listening that are in position of power, I definitely encourage you all, I implore you all to do what's right. As Reverend Dr. Rick said, let us do the right thing. That today or tomorrow you have a legacy, and that the generations to come can say, hey, because of this leader, we now have this, expansion, this opportunity. And so let us all connect together. Let us all brainstorm together, because one of the things that we know is that poverty can be dismantled, right? And when we can push education, when we can encourage education, when we can make education accessible, that is one of the things that can dismantle poverty. So I leave you all with that. Reverend Dr. Riggs, I thank you so much for your time today. Thank you so much for, sharing your platform, for bringing me on, and just for allowing me to be in this space. I'm very, very humbled. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome, and believe me, I know we'll be having you back here again. So this is just the beginning of certain things, but just forging that relationship with you and the expertise you have is very critical to what we do here. So I want to thank you also for making yourself available to just be on the platform. And again, we apologize for the glitches, the different issues we have with the sound. But I think you heard her heart and you heard the gist of what she presented to us tonight. And so we want to thank you all again. To our audience, we say thank you for being here. Please share the word to others. They can follow us on Facebook. It's the number 4 AfriH. On Facebook, they can like us. They can be a part of what we are doing. We also just want to let you know that we are a nonprofit organization, a 501c3 organization. If your heart is touched by what we're doing and you want to be a blessing to what we want to do, because there are some programs we're looking at, like conferences and things like that, to bring these professionals under one roof to do some teaching and training. If you want to just be a part of what we are doing and contribute, we have donation cash app and Zelle is right there on the screen. Feel free, as your heart is touched, to be a blessing. But nonetheless, just keep coming, please. We appreciate in you being here, making comments. Thank you for all those who commented. Really appreciated it, and we look forward to being back here. I will say this to you all. When we started this podcast earlier this year, we started every other Thursday, but beginning this month of June, we're going to be doing every Thursday. So we started little, but the need to just be visible weekly is upon us. So we'll be posting again the next telecast for next Thursday, our next guest and next topic. And feel free to join again Thursday, 7 o'clock. We'll try to make it 45 minutes, at least 30 to 45 minutes on Thursdays. So we'll be back here next Thursday, same time, 7 o'clock to 7:45. Thank you again, Ms. Gabrielle Saygbe. Appreciate you, and thanks for your service. Thanks for everything you do to help the next generation in the alternative education. We really appreciate it. Friends, God bless you. Look to see you again next time. Have a great and a wonderful evening, everybody. Good night.
Night. Thank you so much.